you ever felt like something wasn't quite right? Like there's a layer beneath what the world shows you, something hidden, just out of sight? That's how it felt when I heard about the release of the iPhone 16. The hype was massive. Everyone was talking about its new features, how it was a game changer. But the more I looked into it, the more uneasy I became. What if there was more to it? What if the truth wasn't in the ads, the press releases, or the tech blogs? What if they were lying to us? The excitement around the iPhone 16 was at an all-time high. People lined up outside stores waiting for hours just to get their hands on the latest tech marvel. I wasn't particularly a tech enthusiast, but even I couldn't avoid hearing about it. It was on the news, social media, everywhere. My friends wouldn't stop talking about its insane new features, augmented reality, health tracking, and some kind of new mysterious AI feature called Cortex Mode. It seemed too good to be true, and as I watched the ads roll out, a strange feeling settled in my gut. I decided to attend one of the unveiling events in person. It was packed. Thousands of people gathered, all staring at the massive screen as the CEO of the company started his presentation. The energy in the room was electric, but something about the way he spoke sent shivers down my spine. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and the excitement in his voice felt off, almost rehearsed, like a well-practiced lie. As the presentation continued, they showcased the AI-driven Cortex Mode, explaining how it would revolutionize the way we interact with technology. It was supposed to connect us in ways we could never imagine before. The words felt hollow, but everyone around me was buying into it, cheering and clapping like they had just witnessed the future. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. After the event, I headed home with an uneasy feeling in my chest. My phone buzzed with notifications, articles, tweets, and videos all raving about the new iPhone 16. I opened one of the reviews expecting the usual praise for Apple's innovation, but something strange caught my eye in the comment section. A user had posted, "Don't fall for it. They're not telling us everything. Look deeper into Cortex Mode." The comment was quickly buried under hundreds of others, most praising the phone or arguing about specs. But that one sentence stuck with me. Why would someone say that? What did they mean by not telling us everything? Curiosity gnawed at me, so I clicked on the user's profile. It was sparse, no photo, no personal information, just a username, ShadowWatcher19. I scrolled through their posts, but most of them were cryptic, short warnings about technology, data privacy, and corporate control. There wasn't much to go on, but something about it all seemed strange. Why would someone go to such lengths to post warnings in the middle of a tech frenzy? That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My mind raced with questions, but no answers. As I lay in bed, the unease from the presentation returned, stronger than before. I decided I couldn't let this go. I needed to find out what they weren't telling us about the iPhone 16. The next morning, I decided to dig deeper. I started by searching for information about Cortex Mode. What exactly was it, and how did it work? On the surface, all the explanations seemed simple enough. It was an AI-driven feature designed to make the phone smarter, more intuitive. It could learn your habits, help you organize your life, and even anticipate your needs before you knew them. But something about it didn't sit right with me. Every article I read sounded like it had been copy-pasted from a press release. There were no real reviews, no in-depth analysis, just the same buzzwords repeated over and over. Revolutionary, groundbreaking, life-changing. Frustrated, I decided to return to the comments section where I first saw ShadowWatcher19's post. But when I got there, the comment was gone, deleted. The user's profile was gone too, wiped clean like it had never existed. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. Why would someone go through the trouble of deleting that one comment unless it had hit a nerve, unless there was some truth to it? I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to find out more about this mysterious AI feature. That's when I started noticing something else. In several articles, buried deep within the text, were mentions of strange malfunctions. People complaining that their phones were acting odd, responding to thoughts, not just actions. It was subtle, but the more I read, the more unsettling the reports became. People were claiming that the phone seemed to know what they wanted before they even touched it, like it could read their minds. Could that be what Cortex mode was really about? Was it more than just an AI helper? My gut told me I was onto something, but the more I searched, the more roadblocks I hit. Information was disappearing, articles were being edited, and forums were being shut down. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. As the days passed, my obsession with uncovering the truth about the iPhone 16 grew stronger. I began to notice patterns. People who spoke out against Cortex mode were being silenced. Their posts vanished, their profiles deleted. It wasn't just happening on obscure forums either. Even well-known tech reviewers who questioned the technology were suddenly retracting their statements or disappearing from social media entirely. One evening, while scrolling through yet another forum, I received a direct message from an anonymous account. The message simply read, "Stop looking into it. They're watching you." My heart skipped a beat. I quickly looked around my apartment, half expecting someone to be there watching me. I was alone, but the message sent chills down my spine. Who were they? And why were they warning me? But instead of scaring me off, the message only fueled my determination. I knew I was onto something, and I wasn't about to back down now. I replied to the message asking who they were and what they knew about Cortex mode. Minutes passed with no response, and just as I was about to give up, my phone pinged with another message. "You don't know what you're getting into. It's bigger than you think." I was about to respond again when my phone suddenly shut off. The screen went black, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get it to turn back on. I tried restarting it, plugging it into the charger. Nothing worked. Panic set in. Had they somehow disabled my phone? Were they really watching me? I grabbed my laptop and tried to continue my search there, but the internet was down too. Every site I tried to access either timed out or gave me an error message. It was as if someone was cutting off all my access to information. That's when I realized just how deep this conspiracy went. I decided to take a break from the internet and gather my thoughts. But as I sat in silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and a cold chill ran down my spine. I glanced around my apartment again, but everything seemed normal, until I noticed something odd. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a small red light blinking in the corner of the room. At first, I thought it was just a reflection or maybe a device I had forgotten about, but when I looked closer, my heart raced. It wasn't a reflection, it was a camera. Someone had been watching me. The realization that I was being watched hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood frozen, staring at the blinking red light, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. How long had it been there? Who put it there? My mind raced with questions, none of which had any comforting answers. Panic surged through me as I grabbed a chair and stood on it to inspect the device. It was a tiny camera, expertly hidden in the corner of the ceiling, almost blending in with the shadows. Whoever installed it had known exactly what they were doing. They wanted it to be just out of sight, but still there, recording everything. I yanked it down, my hands trembling, and examined it. There were no markings, no labels, nothing to indicate where it had come from. But I knew one thing for sure. Someone had been watching me, tracking my every move. I quickly unplugged every device in my apartment, throwing my phone into a drawer and shutting my laptop. I wasn't sure if it would help, but the thought of someone listening in or seeing me sent waves of paranoia through my mind. I paced around, my heart racing, trying to think of my next move. The anonymous messages, the strange malfunctions, the camera, it was all connected. But why? What were they trying to hide about the iPhone 16? And more importantly, how far were they willing to go to stop me from finding out? I needed answers, fast. With my phone and internet down, I had no choice but to leave my apartment and find a way to contact someone. I couldn't trust any public computers, and I wasn't sure if my phone was compromised, but I knew one person who might be able to help. My friend, Mark. He worked in IT and was always paranoid about cybersecurity. If anyone could help me figure this out, it was him. I grabbed my coat and rushed out of the apartment, looking over my shoulder every few minutes, paranoid that someone might be following me. The streets felt colder than usual, and every passerby seemed suspicious. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even outside. When I finally reached Mark's place, I banged on his door, hoping he was home. A few seconds later, he opened it, a look of confusion on his face. "Dude, what's going on?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I think I might have," I replied, walking inside and glancing around, making sure no one had followed me. "I need your help. Something's wrong. It's about the iPhone 16. Mark raised an eyebrow. "What about it? You know I don't buy into all those tech conspiracy theories." I took a deep breath and explained everything. Shadow Watcher 19's warning, the deleted comment, the camera in my apartment, and the strange malfunctions people were reporting. By the time I finished, Mark's skeptical expression had turned serious. "That's weird," he admitted, rubbing his chin. "Especially the camera part. You're sure it wasn't just some old security device?" "No way," I said firmly. "I've lived in that apartment for 2 years. That camera wasn't there before. Someone put it there recently." Mark nodded, clearly thinking things over. "Okay, let's start by checking if your phone or laptop was compromised. If someone's messing with you, they might have installed spyware or something." Mark booted up his heavily encrypted computer and asked me to hand over my phone and laptop. He plugged them in, running a series of diagnostic tools I didn't understand. Minutes passed in silence, with only the soft hum of his computer filling the room. I watched as lines of code flashed across the screen, feeling a sense of dread growing in my chest. What if we were too late? What if they had already erased everything? But then, Mark frowned. "There's definitely something off here." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding. "There's a hidden program running on both your phone and laptop. It's not malware exactly, but it's unusual. It's designed to track activity, monitor keystrokes, and send data to an external server. This isn't amateur work. Whoever did this knows what they're doing." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Can you remove it?" Mark nodded, already typing away. "Yeah, I can wipe it, but that's not the main problem. The bigger question is, who's behind it?" I sat back, my mind racing. Someone was tracking me, but why? Was it because of the iPhone 16? Was I getting too close to the truth? After a few minutes, Mark turned to me. "I've wiped the program from your devices. But listen, if they've gone this far to monitor you, they won't stop just because I cleaned up your phone. They'll find another way." I swallowed hard. "So what do I do?" Mark leaned back in his chair, his face serious. "You need to be careful. Stop digging into this, at least for now. Whoever's behind this has resources, and they won't hesitate to make you disappear if you keep poking around." But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I was so close to uncovering the truth. Despite Mark's warning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was onto something bigger than I had ever imagined. I needed more information, but I wasn't sure where to look. Then, as if fate was guiding me, I received an encrypted email later that night from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "iPhone 16, the truth you've been searching for." Against my better judgment, I opened it. The email contained a single line of text. "Meet me at the old warehouse on 7th Avenue at midnight. Come alone." Every instinct told me it was a trap. But if there was even the slightest chance that I could get answers, I had to take it. Grabbing my coat, I headed out into the night, my heart pounding with both fear and anticipation. The warehouse was a dark, looming structure, long abandoned and forgotten by the city. As I approached, I could feel eyes on me, but I kept moving. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. And then I saw him, a shadowy figure standing at the far end of the room. "You came," the voice said, stepping into the dim light. It was an older man, his face lined with worry and fear. "I wasn't sure if you would." "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you contact me?" The man glanced around nervously before speaking. "I used to work for Apple. I was on the team that developed Cortex mode. But they lied to us. They didn't tell us the real purpose of the technology." My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? He leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Cortex mode wasn't designed to help people. It was designed to control them. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. My mind struggled to grasp what he was saying. Control people? How could that be possible? The man's eyes darted around as if he was afraid someone might be listening. They told us it was an advanced AI meant to assist users, he continued, his voice shaky. But as we worked on it, I started noticing anomalies, strange code embedded deep within the program. When I tried to bring it up with my superiors, they brushed me off. But the more I dug, the more I realized the truth. Cortex mode isn't just AI. It's a neural interface designed to tap into users' subconscious minds. My stomach turned. You're saying it can read people's thoughts? He shook his head. It's worse than that. It can influence thoughts, change the way people think, manipulate their emotions, control their decisions, all without them realizing it. I took a step back, the gravity of his words sinking in. Why would they do that? What's the point? The man's face darkened. Power, control. They want to create a society where people are dependent on their devices, where they can be subtly influenced and manipulated into doing whatever the people in charge want. And it's not just Apple. They're working with governments, corporations, and even the media to roll this out on a global scale. I felt sick. Everything I had suspected, everything Shadow Watcher 19 had warned about, it was all true. They were using the iPhone 16 as a tool for mass manipulation, and no one even knew it. What can we do to stop it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The man's eyes were filled with sorrow. I don't know if we can, but you need to get this information out there, expose the truth before it's too late. They're already watching you. They'll come after you just like they did me. But if enough people know, maybe, just maybe, we can stop them. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse. The man's face went pale. They're here, he whispered. Panic surged through me as the footsteps grew louder, echoing off the walls of the warehouse. I grabbed the man's arm, pulling him toward the exit, but he shook his head. You need to go, he said urgently. I'll hold them off. No way, I protested. I'm not leaving you here. But it was too late. The doors burst open and men in black suits flooded into the room, guns drawn. I didn't have time to think. I sprinted toward the back exit, dodging between crates and debris, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't look back. The sound of heavy boots stomping through the warehouse echoed behind me, and I knew I had seconds before they would catch up. The dim, flickering lights barely illuminated the exit, and my heart raced with the thought that I might not make it. My breath was ragged, my legs screaming in protest as I pushed them to move faster. Just as I reached the back door, I heard the sharp crack of gunfire. I ducked instinctively, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the handle. It wouldn't budge. I cursed under my breath, shoving my shoulder against the rusted metal door. With a groaning creak, it finally gave way, and I stumbled outside into the cold night air. For a moment, I thought I was safe. The alley behind the warehouse was empty, shrouded in shadows, but I knew better than to stop. They were still coming. I darted down the alley, weaving between dumpsters and broken fences, trying to stay out of sight. My mind raced, replaying the man's final words. Get the information out there. I knew I had to, but how? They had already compromised my devices, tracked my movements, and now they were hunting me down. It felt impossible. After what seemed like an eternity, I finally made it out onto the main street. I looked both ways, scanning for any sign of black SUVs or men in suits. The street was eerily quiet, save for the occasional distant car horn. I had to keep moving. I knew I couldn't go home. They had already bugged my apartment, and showing up there would only lead them right to me. My phone was still in the drawer back at home, so at least they couldn't track me through that. But I needed somewhere safe to lay low, somewhere they wouldn't think to look. There was only one place that came to mind, my old friend Sam's cabin. It was out in the middle of nowhere, deep in the woods about 2 hours outside the city. Sam and I hadn't talked in a while, but I hoped he would still welcome me. I hailed a cab, telling the driver to take me as far out of the city as he could. The whole ride, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Every car that passed felt like a threat, every pedestrian a potential agent sent to bring me down. The cab driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror a couple of times, probably sensing my unease. I kept my head down, trying not to draw attention. After what felt like an eternity, the cab dropped me off at a small gas station on the outskirts of a rural town. From here, I would have to walk the rest of the way. The trees lining the road seemed to close in on me as I made my way toward the cabin, the darkness between them almost suffocating. Finally, after what felt like hours, I reached Sam's place. The small, weather-beaten cabin was hidden among the trees, its windows dark. I knocked on the door, praying he was home. After a few moments, the door creaked open and Sam's familiar face appeared, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What the hell are you doing here, man?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "I need your help," I said, my voice shaky. "It's a long story, but I'm in trouble." Sam opened the door wider, motioning for me to come inside. "You'd better explain." Sam listened patiently as I recounted everything that had happened. The iPhone 16, the anonymous messages, the surveillance, the man at the warehouse. His expression grew more serious with every detail I revealed, and by the time I finished, he looked just as paranoid as I felt. "This is some serious stuff, man," Sam said, shaking his head. "You really got mixed up in something big." "I didn't ask for this," I replied, running a hand through my hair. "I was just trying to figure out what was going on with the iPhone 16. I never thought it would go this far." Sam stood up, pacing the small living room. "So what's your plan? You can't stay here forever, and you definitely can't go back to the city. If these people are as powerful as you say, they'll find you sooner or later." "I need to get the information out," I said, my voice firm. "The man at the warehouse said if enough people knew, maybe we could stop them. But I don't even know where to start. They've got my devices bugged, and who knows how many people are already compromised by this Cortex mode." Sam stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing in thought. "You need to go offline, completely. If they're tracking you digitally, the only way to stay safe is to cut all ties with technology." "How am I supposed to expose them if I can't use the internet?" I asked, frustrated. Sam smirked. "There's more than one way to spread a message, my friend." Sam led me to the back of the cabin where he opened a trap door hidden beneath an old rug. I followed him down a narrow staircase, feeling a sense of unease as we descended into what looked like a makeshift bunker. "Welcome to the underground," Sam said, flipping on a set of dim lights that revealed an old but functional radio setup, along with piles of papers and maps pinned to the walls. "What is all this?" I asked, looking around. "People like us, those who don't trust the system. We've been preparing for something like this for years," Sam explained. "There's an entire network of people out there who know the truth, who aren't controlled by technology. They communicate through encrypted radio signals, handwritten letters, anything that can't be tracked." I raised an eyebrow. "And you've been a part of this underground movement?" Sam shrugged. "I've always been a bit of a conspiracy nut, you know that. But after hearing your story, I think it's time we took this seriously." He sat down at the radio and began tuning it to a specific frequency. "There's a guy I know who's deep into exposing tech companies for shady practices. If anyone can help you get this story out, it's him." After a few tense moments of waiting, a crackling voice came through the radio. "This is Cypher, who's calling?" Sam glanced at me before responding. "It's Sam. I've got a friend here who uncovered something big. We need to get the word out, offline." There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought Cypher had disconnected, but then the voice returned, colder this time. "I hope you know what you're getting into. Once we broadcast this, there's no going back. They'll come after you harder than ever." "I don't have a choice," I said, leaning closer to the radio. "They're already after me, but people need to know what they're doing with the iPhone 16. If we don't stop them, they'll control everything." Cypher sighed. "All right, I'll help you. But you'd better be ready to run, because once this goes live, they'll know exactly where to find you." Sam nodded at me, and I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. This was it. The moment that would either save us or doom us. There was no turning back now. The next few hours were a blur. Cypher helped us craft a message that would be broadcast to underground networks around the world, warning people about the dangers of the iPhone 16 and the hidden Cortex mode. We couldn't use names or specifics that would tie it directly back to us, but the message was clear. A new technology was being used to manipulate and control people, and it was already in the hands of millions. Once the message was ready, Sam and Cypher coordinated the broadcast, sending it out through encrypted channels that would be nearly impossible for anyone to trace. But that didn't mean we were safe. As soon as the broadcast went live, I felt a strange sense of both relief and dread. We had done it. We had warned people. But now the real danger began. "They'll be coming for you," Cypher said over the radio. "You'd better get out of there, now." Sam and I packed up as quickly as we could, grabbing only the essentials. We knew we couldn't stay at the cabin anymore. It was only a matter of time before they tracked the broadcast back to us. Every second counted. As we made our way through the dense woods, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The trees seemed to close in around us, and every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of panic through me. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see men in black suits emerging from the shadows, but the forest remained eerily quiet. After hours of walking, we finally reached a small clearing where an old rusted pickup truck was hidden beneath a tarp. Sam had stashed it there years ago, just in case he ever needed to disappear. "We'll head to a safe house I know," Sam said as he started the engine. "It's not far, but we need to lay low for a while." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. As we drove deeper into the wilderness, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would the broadcast be enough to stop them, or were we too late? The truck bounced along the dirt road, the old engine groaning with every mile. Sam kept his eyes on the path ahead, but I could see the tension in his grip on the steering wheel. We both knew we weren't safe. It was only a matter of time before they tracked us down. "Do you think the broadcast reached enough people?" I asked, breaking the silence. Sam glanced over at me, his expression grim. "I hope so. It's hard to say how many were listening. The underground network is strong, but it's not like we're broadcasting to millions. Still, word spreads fast. If enough people pick it up, they'll share it." I nodded, though a knot of doubt twisted in my stomach. Would it be enough? We were up against a massive corporation with limitless resources and a network of people willing to do whatever it took to keep the truth buried. The road ahead disappeared into thick woods, and for a moment I allowed myself to relax. Maybe we could hide out long enough for the message to spread and force the company's hand. Maybe. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, cutting through the darkness like twin beacons of dread. My heart skipped a beat and I instinctively ducked lower in my seat. "They're here," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. Sam's jaw clenched, and without a word he slammed his foot on the gas. The truck lurched forward, but the engine sputtered in protest. The headlights behind us grew closer, and I could hear the rumble of a powerful engine gaining on us. "Hold on!" Sam shouted as he veered off the road and into the forest. The truck plowed through bushes and branches, the headlights behind us swerving wildly as they tried to follow. The vehicle pursuing us wasn't just any car. It was a sleek black SUV, the same kind I'd seen earlier. My stomach dropped. They weren't going to stop. They couldn't afford to let us get away. The forest was dense and the truck wasn't built for off-road pursuits. We crashed through trees, branches scraping against the windows, and the tires slipping on the uneven ground. Sam's face was set in determination, but even I could tell we were losing the race. "They're not going to give up, are they?" I said, my voice trembling. "Nope," Sam replied, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. "But I'm not giving up either." The SUV was still hot on our trail, its headlights piercing through the trees. We bounced over a small hill, and I was thrown against the door, gritting my teeth to hold back a scream. My mind raced as I considered our options. We couldn't outrun them. We needed to think of something else, anything. Suddenly, the truck jerked to a halt with a loud bang. The tires spun uselessly in the mud, and Sam cursed under his breath. "We're stuck," he growled. I looked over my shoulder, panic rising. The SUV was just a few hundred feet behind us, and it was closing in fast. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Sam glanced around, his eyes scanning the dark forest. "We run," he said simply. Without another word, we both threw open our doors and bolted into the woods. My legs ached from exhaustion, but adrenaline pushed me forward. The sounds of the SUV's engine grew louder, and I knew they would be right behind us soon. The forest was thick, branches slapping against my face as I tore through the underbrush. I could hear Sam's heavy breathing beside me and the distant shouts of men closing in from all sides. They were tracking us, hunting us like animals. We ran for what felt like hours, but the truth was it had only been minutes. My lungs burned, my legs felt like lead, and still the sounds of pursuit grew louder. There was no escaping them. They were too well organized, too relentless. Just when I thought I couldn't go any farther, Sam grabbed my arm and pulled me down behind a fallen tree. We crouched low, our chests heaving as we struggled to catch our breath. "They're going to find us," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of my heartbeat. Sam shook his head, his eyes scanning the dark forest around us. "Not if we make it hard for them." I didn't understand what he meant at first, but then I saw him pulling a small device out of his jacket. It was a handheld EMP generator, something he'd mentioned once in passing but never really explained. "It won't stop them for long," he said quietly, "but it'll mess with their tracking equipment and give us a head start." He flipped the switch, and a low hum filled the air. A few seconds later, the forest around us went eerily silent. The distant hum of the SUV's engine sputtered and died, and the sounds of pursuit abruptly stopped. For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. "Now we run again," Sam whispered, standing up and pulling me to my feet. Without hesitation, we bolted deeper into the woods. We didn't stop, didn't look back. We just kept running, the silence around us as unsettling as the chase had been. After what felt like an eternity, we finally stumbled upon the safe house. It was nothing more than an old abandoned cabin hidden deep in the forest, but to me it looked like salvation. My legs were trembling and my lungs burned with every breath, but we had made it. Sam pushed open the door and we collapsed inside, both of us too exhausted to speak. The cabin was dark and musty with old rotting furniture and cracked windows, but it was shelter, and for now, that was all that mattered. I slumped against the wall, trying to catch my breath. "Do you think they'll find us here?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Sam shook his head, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Not for a while. The EMP should have knocked out their systems, and we've put enough distance between us for now." For the first time in hours, I allowed myself to relax. But even as the adrenaline wore off, the fear lingered. They had tracked us this far, and it was only a matter of time before they caught up again. "What's the plan now?" I asked, trying to push the panic out of my voice. Sam sat down across from me, his face serious. "We wait. Lay low for a bit. We need to figure out our next move carefully. If we're going to survive this, we have to be smarter than them." I nodded, though the thought of waiting in this cabin, helpless, was enough to make my skin crawl. But Sam was right. We had to be smart. And right now, that meant staying hidden. As I leaned my head back against the wall, my mind drifted to the broadcast. Was it enough to spark a movement? Were people out there hearing our message? Or were we just two fugitives hiding in a cabin while the world continued on in ignorance? The weight of the situation pressed down on me. There was no way of knowing if we had done enough. But one thing was certain, we couldn't turn back now. We were in too deep, and the only way out was to see this through to the end. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the cabin window. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. The events of the night before felt like a distant nightmare. But as I opened my eyes and saw Sam sitting by the window keeping watch, the reality of our situation hit me like a ton of bricks. We were still on the run, and the people hunting us weren't going to give up easily. "Get some rest?" Sam asked, not taking his eyes off the trees outside. I nodded, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "As much as I could." Sam's face was tense, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by something harder, more serious. "We're going to have to move again soon. They'll be back on our trail by now." I didn't respond. I knew he was right. We couldn't stay in one place for long, not with them hunting us. But where could we go? Every option felt more dangerous than the last. As I sat there, staring at the floor, a thought occurred to me. What if we took the fight to them? I asked, my voice hesitant. Sam finally turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. What do you mean? They're not going to stop until we're dead or silenced, right? I continued, gaining confidence. So maybe instead of running, we find a way to expose them for good. Get more proof, something undeniable that we can't be silenced for. Sam's eyes narrowed as he considered my words. That's a dangerous game. I know, I said, meeting his gaze. But what other choice do we have? Running isn't going to work forever. We need to hit back, and hit hard. For a long moment, Sam didn't say anything. Then, finally, he stood up, a determined look in his eyes. All right, he said, let's do it. And with those words, we set a new plan in motion, one that would take us straight into the heart of the conspiracy and right into the lion's den. Sam and I sat at the old wobbly table in the cabin, going over what little information we had. The weight of our decision hung heavy in the air. We were no longer running. Now, we were planning to strike back. They control everything, Sam said, pointing to the scattered notes, documents, and scribbled maps we had gathered over the past few days. Their influence spreads through the tech world, politics, the media, you name it. If we're going to expose them, we'll need hard evidence that no one can ignore. I nodded, my mind racing as I tried to wrap my head around the scale of what we were facing. But how do we get that kind of evidence? They've covered their tracks for years. What can we find that others haven't? Sam leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. We have something they don't want out there, the truth about the iPhone 16. That's where we start. But we'll need more. There's a secure facility not too far from here, a place where they store all their most sensitive data. If we can get in, we might find the smoking gun we need. My stomach dropped. You want to break into one of their secure sites? That's suicide, Sam. They'll be expecting us. Sam cracked a smile, though there was no humor in it. They might be expecting us, but they won't expect what we're about to do. He pulled a folded map from his jacket and spread it across the table. It was a blueprint of a sprawling compound hidden deep in the forest. The facility was heavily fortified with layers of security, surveillance, and armed guards. It won't be easy, Sam admitted. But I've been inside places like this before. There are ways in. We'll need to be fast, precise, and ready for anything. If we pull this off, we can blow this whole thing wide open. I studied the map, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about striking back against the people who had manipulated, lied, and controlled us for so long. All right, I said, my voice firm. Let's do it. The next few days were a blur of preparation. We gathered what little supplies we had, studied the blueprints, and practiced our entry strategy over and over again. Every step had to be perfect. One mistake, and we'd be caught, or worse. As we packed up the last of our gear, Sam glanced at me, his expression serious. You ready for this? I swallowed hard, my nerves threatening to take over, but I knew there was no turning back now. I'm ready. We left the cabin under the cover of darkness, moving swiftly and quietly through the forest. The facility was only a few miles away, but every step felt like we were inching closer to danger. The trees were thick, the moon barely peeking through the dense canopy above, casting eerie shadows on the forest floor. As we approached the edge of the compound, Sam signaled for us to stop. We crouched low behind a cluster of bushes, peering out at the facility. It was even more intimidating in person. High fences topped with razor wire surrounded the perimeter, and watchtowers dotted the landscape, each one manned by armed guards. Here we go, Sam whispered, his voice barely audible. We waited for the perfect moment, watching the patrols and timing their movements. When the coast was clear, we darted toward the fence. Sam pulled out a pair of wire cutters and made quick work of the fence, creating just enough space for us to slip through. Once inside, we moved quickly, sticking to the shadows as we made our way toward the main building. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears that I was sure someone would hear it. but we moved undetected, our every step calculated. The building itself was a monolithic structure, cold and sterile. We reached a side door and Sam pulled out a small device, a homemade electronic jammer. He pressed a button and the security cameras around the entrance blinked out. "Let's go," he whispered, opening the door. The inside of the facility was even more oppressive than I had imagined. Long, sterile hallways stretched out before us, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights. Everything was cold, clinical, and designed to remind anyone inside that they were under constant surveillance. We moved quickly, navigating the halls based on the blueprints we had studied. Our goal was the central server room, where we hoped to find the data that would expose the truth. But as we turned a corner, my heart skipped a beat. 2 guards were standing by a door up ahead, chatting casually. We froze, ducking back behind the wall before they could see us. "What now?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Sam glanced around, his mind racing. "We'll have to take them out quietly. We can't risk them raising an alarm." My stomach churned. I wasn't a fighter. I didn't know how to take out anyone, let alone armed guards. "I'll handle it," Sam said, sensing my hesitation. Before I could protest, Sam slipped around the corner, moving with a predator's grace. I watched in tense silence as he approached the guards from behind. With a few swift, practiced movements, he disarmed them both and rendered them unconscious, all without making a sound. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Sam motioned for me to follow, and we continued deeper into the facility. Finally, we reached the server room. It was a massive, windowless chamber filled with rows upon rows of servers humming softly in the cold air. This was it, the heart of their operation. Sam got to work immediately, hacking into the system with a portable terminal he had brought with us. I stood by the door, my heart racing as I kept watch, every noise making me jump. "How long is this going to take?" I whispered, glancing nervously over my shoulder. "Not long," Sam muttered, his fingers flying over the keys. "Just keep an eye out." Minutes felt like hours as I stood there, waiting, listening. Finally, Sam let out a triumphant noise. "Got it," he said, holding up a small flash drive. "This is everything we need. Data on the iPhone 16, their surveillance programs, their political influence, it's all here." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a new wave of fear. We had what we came for, but now we had to get out. Just as we were about to leave the server room, a loud, piercing alarm suddenly blared through the facility. My blood turned to ice. "They know we're here," I said, my voice trembling. Sam cursed under his breath. "We need to move, now." We bolted out of the server room and down the hallway, the alarm echoing all around us. Red emergency lights flashed overhead, casting eerie shadows on the walls. We could hear the sound of footsteps and voices growing closer. "They're coming," I shouted. "Stick to the plan," Sam yelled back as we sprinted toward the exit. But the guards were closing in. We could hear their shouts, the pounding of their boots against the tiled floor. My heart raced as we rounded a corner, only to come face to face with a group of armed men blocking our path. Without hesitation, Sam yanked me back into the cover of a nearby hallway. "We're trapped," I panted, panic rising in my throat. Sam's eyes darted around, his mind racing for a solution. "We can still make it out," he said, though I could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. The sound of the guards' footsteps grew louder, and I knew we were running out of time. We had come so far, but now it felt like everything was slipping away. Then, in the distance, I spotted something. An emergency exit, half hidden behind a stack of crates. "There!" I shouted, pointing. Without another word, we made a break for it, sprinting down the hallway as the guards closed in behind us. We slammed into the exit door, bursting out into the cold night air. But the danger was far from over. The guards were still on our heels, and we had a long way to go before we could consider ourselves safe. The night air hit me like a wall, the cold biting through my clothes as we stumbled out into the open. But there was no time to stop, no time to catch my breath. The guards were still behind us, and they weren't going to give up easily. Sam grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the forest, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of escape. "Keep moving!" he shouted, his voice urgent. We ran as fast as we could, the ground uneven beneath our feet. The trees loomed ahead like dark, towering sentinels, offering the only cover we had. If we could just make it into the forest, maybe, just maybe, we'd have a chance to lose them. But as we sprinted across the open field, I could hear the sound of engines roaring to life. They were sending vehicles after us. We sprinted toward the tree line, our footsteps pounding against the earth, hearts racing. The vehicles roared behind us, their headlights cutting through the night like blades. I could hear the shouts of the guards, the rumble of engines getting closer. "Faster!" Sam urged, pulling me along. The forest loomed ahead, dark and dense, our only hope for cover. My legs burned, every breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps, but I pushed forward. The fear of being caught, of what they would do to us, kept me moving. As we reached the edge of the forest, Sam darted into the shadows of the trees and I followed close behind. The moment we entered the forest, the world around us seemed to shift. The thick canopy overhead swallowed the light, casting everything into darkness. The branches scraped at our arms and faces, but we didn't slow down. The sound of the vehicles behind us grew muffled as we pushed deeper into the forest. I could hear the guards yelling, but they were disoriented now, their flashlights flickering in the distance. We weaved through the trees, trying to stay ahead of them, using the darkness to our advantage. "We need to keep moving," Sam whispered, his voice barely audible over my ragged breathing. "If we can get far enough in, we can lose them." I nodded, though I wasn't sure how much further I could go. My body was screaming in protest, every muscle aching, but I couldn't stop now. Suddenly, Sam froze, holding up a hand to signal me to stop. I skidded to a halt beside him, my heart hammering in my chest. We crouched low behind a thick tree trunk, straining to listen. In the distance, I could hear the guards. They were close, but not close enough to spot us yet. We held our breath, waiting in tense silence as their voices grew louder, then began to fade as they moved in the wrong direction. Sam let out a quiet sigh of relief. "We lost them, for now," he whispered. But we both knew it wasn't over yet. We crept deeper into the forest, moving slowly, carefully, trying not to make a sound. Every snap of a twig underfoot felt like a gunshot in the silence. My nerves were on edge, every shadow, every rustle in the leaves making my heart race. Sam was focused, his eyes constantly scanning the darkness ahead. "We need to find shelter. If they don't catch us tonight, they'll be back with more men tomorrow. And drones. Drones." The word sent a shiver down my spine. We had evaded the guards for now, but technology was always on their side. They could track us, find us, no matter where we ran. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on me. This wasn't a fight we could win by just running. But for now, it was all we had. We stumbled upon a small cave hidden among the rocks. It wasn't much, but it would give us cover for the night. Sam led the way inside, and I followed, grateful for a moment to rest. My legs were trembling from exhaustion, my lungs burning from the cold air and the constant fear. "We'll stay here for the night," Sam said, his voice low. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out our next move." I nodded, too tired to argue, and sat down on the cold stone floor of the cave. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and the weight of everything that had happened began to settle on my shoulders. We had the evidence, but we were still far from safe. I lay down, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, and I could hear the distant rumble of the guards' vehicles. They were still out there, still searching. But for now, we were hidden. Morning came slowly, the first rays of sunlight barely penetrating the thick canopy above. I woke up stiff and sore, my mind still clouded with fear and exhaustion. Sam was already awake, sitting near the entrance of the cave, keeping watch. "We need to move before they bring in drones," he said quietly. "They'll sweep the area soon, and if we're still here, they'll find us." I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "What's the plan? We can't keep running forever." Sam looked at me, his expression grim. "We don't have to run forever. We just need to make one last move." He pulled out the flash drive, holding it up. "This is our ticket. If we can get this to the right people, we can expose everything. But we need to do it carefully. They'll try to stop us at every turn." I nodded, understanding what was at stake. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about exposing the truth. The evidence we had could bring down the entire system that had been built on lies. "How do we get it out there?" I asked. Sam stood up, pacing the small space. "We need to find someone we can trust, someone with a platform big enough to get the word out. But we also need to be smart about it. If we go public too soon, they'll bury us before the story ever gets out." I knew he was right. The people we were up against had resources, connections, and power. They could silence us before we even had a chance to speak, but I wasn't going to let that stop us. "We'll find a way," I said, determination rising in my chest. "We have to." Over the next few days, we moved from one place to another, staying on the run, always just a step ahead of the people chasing us. The tension was constant, the fear never leaving my mind. But through it all, we kept our focus on the mission. Finally, we made contact with a journalist, someone who had been working for years to expose corruption and lies in the tech industry, someone we could trust. We arranged a meeting in a secluded location, away from prying eyes and ears. It was risky, but it was the only way. As we waited for the journalist to arrive, my heart pounded in my chest. This was it. This was our chance to expose the truth, to take down the people who had lied to the world for so long. The journalist arrived, a cautious look in their eyes as they approached us. Sam handed over the flash drive, explaining everything we had uncovered, every lie, every manipulation. The journalist listened carefully, their expression growing more serious with each passing moment. This is huge," they said, their voice barely above a whisper. "If this gets out, it will change everything." Sam nodded. "That's the plan, but you need to be careful. They'll come for you too once they realize what you have." The journalist nodded, slipping the flash drive into their pocket. "I know the risks, but the world needs to know the truth." As we watched the journalist leave, a sense of relief washed over me. We had done it. We had gotten the evidence into the hands of someone who could make a difference. But I knew the battle was far from over. "They'll come for us," I said, my voice quiet. Sam nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Let them come. We've done what we needed to do." And as we stood there side by side, watching the sun set over the horizon, I knew that no matter what happened next, we had already won. A few weeks later, the story broke. The evidence we had uncovered made headlines across the world. The iPhone 16 scandal, the secret surveillance programs, the political manipulation. It was all out in the open. The world reacted with shock, anger, and disbelief. Protests erupted, investigations were launched, and the people in power scrambled to contain the fallout. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Sam and I stayed in the shadows, watching from a distance as the world slowly began to change. We knew we could never return to our old lives. We were still fugitives, still hunted. But we had accomplished what we set out to do. The truth had been exposed, and the lies that had been fed to us for so long were finally unraveling. And as I looked up at the sky, I felt a strange sense of peace. We had fought back against the system that had tried to control us, and we had won. For now, that was enough.